If the politicians are gaming the system through redistricting to make it such that you can't hold them accountable, guess what? They're not really going to be interested in listening to you, and they're going to just do what they decide is best for them, rather than being responsive to the needs and the will of the people.
This is At Brookings, a weekly in-depth look at issues behind the news. This week, Congressional Redistricting.
The census rolls around once every 10 years, and with it comes congressional redistricting. Mandated by the Constitution, redistricting calls for changing the map of each voting district if the population grows or wanes. Meant to ensure that every person has equal representation in the U.S. House, it's a great idea in theory, but it can be complicated and even corrupt in practice, explains non-resident senior fellow Michael McDonald.
What we have in the United States is this system where it's usually the people who are responsible for representing the districts are the ones who are responsible for drawing the districting plans. And so the temptation is just too much for these individuals. They battle to get themselves elected, and they look at redistricting as just another tool to help them further their political careers or the interests of their party. So then, with that temptation, they'll stick their hand down in that cookie jar, and they will draw districts that move their opponents out of their districts, or they'll draw a district that shores up their political supporters so that they don't really have to worry as much about a political challenger in a general election.
There are two states, California and Arizona, which have really overhauled their redistricting process to make it a bit fairer and more inclusive. Is that right?
California and Arizona are two recent examples of states that have created redistricting commissions where citizens serve on these commissions. They operate in open meetings in sunlight. They have to take public testimony. They produce some maps, and then people can respond to those maps that they produce. And there's a very open and transparent process where the politicians are not involved directly in the drawing of the lines, and the public gets to comment, and the commission can be responsive to those comments.
It was actually one of our founding fathers, Eldridge Gerry, who inadvertently gave his name to the process of redistricting to one's own advantage, something we now call gerrymandering.
He drew this infamous district that most people have seen in their textbooks at some point or another. It's the shape of a district that looks like a salamander, and a political cartoonist said, oh, it's a gerrymander, and now we call it a gerrymander because we can't remember that his name was actually pronounced Gary. And that particular district was designed to help out Elbridge Gerry's political party in Massachusetts, help them win control of that state legislature. And so that, for better or worse, that founding father, Elbridge Gerry, we're going to remember him more about gerrymandering than we are going to be about his contribution to the creation of the country.
And it's interesting to note that President Obama himself has also been a victim of gerrymandering.
Back in the 2000s, he had run for Congress and against Bobby Rush, and he won about 38% of the primary vote, and Bobby Rush felt a little threatened by him, and this was in 2000. Well, we had just had a census, so then there's a redistricting, and so what did Bobby Rush do? Bobby Rush drew Obama's home out of his district and put it in Jesse Jackson Jr.'s home. So these sorts of things go on even today.
And it was because of racial gerrymandering that the Congress stepped in 1965 and passed the Voting Rights Act to guarantee that minorities would be fairly represented.
White Southerners discovered after the Civil War is that besides intimidating African Americans in the South and doing other nefarious things, they also decided, hey, you know what? We can deny African Americans political power by taking their communities and fracturing them up so that it's not possible for them to have a large enough majority in a district to elect a candidate of their choice. And that was a practice, this sort of racial gerrymandering, that happened up until the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And Congress then stepped in and said, well, you know, that's not fair. And we need to ensure that minorities have a chance to be represented fairly. And so they instituted the Voting Rights Act, and it's been a wild success. If you look at the number of minority candidates who are elected to state and local offices from the 1960s till today, it went from virtually zero to thousands.
Well, how will the 2010 census affect apportionment, which actually dictates how many congressional seats there are in any given state?
Now, there are some states, because they're growing rapidly, they gain congressional seats. There are others because there really aren't any states that are decreasing in size, but there are some states that just aren't keeping up with the population growth in the very fast-growing states. And so those states will be losing congressional districts. And the states that are losing congressional districts are primarily in the Rust Belt. It's a trend we've been seeing for the last 20 to 30 years. And the states that are gaining in congressional seats and gaining in population are the southern tier of states, going all the way from the west coast to the east coast.
Well, Michael, you say that litigation almost always follows redistricting, but through social networking and other tools, we can open up the process, make it more transparent, and probably less controversial.
If you're an interested person and seeing how there's so much interest in social networking and other things through the internet, I really do expect that we're going to see a lot of citizen participation through the web. And that's going to change things because in the past, when we get back again to this notion of litigation, courts have only really been able to adjudicate between redistricting plans that were introduced during the political process. And this time around, there's going to be a larger menu of plans available. And if a state government or a commission doesn't really satisfy their state criteria, but a high school student managed to do it better than them, then it could be that a state court will frown upon what the actions of the state government were and overturn that map.
Stay up to date with the latest research, learn about Brookings events, and search our directory of experts, all from your mobile device. To download Brookings for your BlackBerry, Android, or iPhone, go to brookings.edu/mobile.